Hello, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of Back to Basics. I am still Pastor Don. I know 30-some episodes in, still the case. And I am joined by everybody's best friend, Courtney. Is dabbing
Hello.
still a thing?
What? It's not dabbing.
The
God,
dab?
what a dad. Ugh. I'm Artie, the strongest man in the world. It's the most 90s. Oh, come on, man.
Oh, okay. I never knew that one. Yeah?
Yeah, from Pete and Pete. Come on, man.
Yeah, honestly.
Okay, apparently, I'm the one busting out the deep cuts this evening.
Yeah, right off the bat, too.
I look vaguely decade appropriate too. I've reached this age of momdom where I'm just like, yep, let's dress like I'm in high school, but cool.
I was never cool.
Nah, same. Anyway,
all right.
So let's talk about the Bible.
Yeah, we are going to do Bible things today. For those of you who are longtime listeners of this wonderful podcast and/or video series, we're starting at the beginning of Genesis, working our way through the Bible one story at a time, ploddingly, slowly, and constantly making inappropriate jokes as we go. But last month, we did our very special episode for Christmas, and we kind of hit upon a fun thing to do. Genesis is good, and we're going to keep doing Genesis. But we figure once a month, we're going to take a break from Genesis and hit on some of this New Testament stuff all the youngins are talking about. So we started with our very special episode for Christmas, and we did a good chunk of Matthew 1. I'm going to do the whole thing, but we've talked about it for the most part. So today we are going to go ahead and we're going to lean into, and I know this may be a surprise, Matthew 2. Yay! And we're going to basically, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to keep from Matthew 2, and we're going to keep going through all the Gospels and see what we can't figure out. And if we get through that, hey, we'll just keep tearing through the New Testament until we run out of that too. It'll take us a lot longer at once a month, but hey, we're going to do what we're going to do. Yeah. So what we're going to do today is we're going to do this kind of in the same style that we did one of our more recent episodes from Genesis. We've got a longish chapter here, chapter 2, the visit of the Magi, the escape to Egypt, the massacre of the infants, and the return from Egypt. We've got a full 23 verses of chapter to deal with here.
And it's kind of all over the place. So we were figuring that you would go ahead and read it, and I would pop in pineapple in occasionally. I may just give you random fruit. I think that's more fun. But I will name a random bit of produce, and he will stop, and we will talk about whatever crazy bullshit that I want to talk about.
Yeah, so she's going to throw out our fruity scriptural safe word, which is a phrase that has never before been said on YouTube, I'm pretty sure.
That is, somebody snapped up that Reddit username, fruity scriptural safe word.
Yes, that's perfect. So she's going to throw out our fruity scriptural safe word every time she hits something worth talking about, and we're going to stop and then talk about it. So, are we ready?
Yes.
All right. Without any further ado, let's get ourselves started with Matthew chapter 2. For those of you, by the way, who may be wondering why I keep looking off to the side here, I've got a somewhat new setup where I'm using my iPad as a second monitor instead of holding it down in front of me. So I'm giving you my best profile. We'll look at it that way. Let's get started. Matthew chapter 2, the visit of the Magi. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem asking, "Where's the child who's been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star in the east and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born.
I was caught up in the narrative. Pear.
Okay, we got to start with a pear. Good job.
So the star in the east thing, what, like, how much do we legitimately understand about this? Because we're definitely kind of changing modes here between, the Old Testament reading is sort of in a different place historically.
Yeah,
this is not the way I can think of to put it than the New Testament.
Well, this is actually a fun new feature in our New Testament readings. We can talk about things that we have some historical evidence for, because
Yeah,
2,000
that's
years ago,
exactly what I'm talking about.
yeah, 2,000 years ago is a long time, but not nearly as long as 4,000 or more. So,
Yeah.
we are navigating our way out of the mists of history here. So you're asking about the star, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
I'm kind of into that stuff, and I'm very curious. And I feel like I've heard a couple of different things over the years from different pastors that all seem kind of plausible, but not certain.
couple of points to be said here. And I'm going to kind of get to all of them. The first thing I'm going to start with is that the Magi themselves, and this is something we tend to roll past, are not Jewish.
Yeah. They're clearly from another country. They mentioned this specifically.
Yeah, they're not Jewish, and they're not religious in the way we would expect here either. They are, for lack of a better term, astrologians. Not quite astrologers, not quite astronomers, probably somewhere in between. So not exactly scientists, but period appropriate, squint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, probably about as close as you can get. And so they are trying to apply some sort of vague empiricism to this. And in their separate country, they observed this star and drew conclusions that said, okay, King of the Jews. So this tells us, for one, something's going on with this star that is connected not just to Jewish historical mysticism and religion, but also to other things elsewhere.
That's really cool.
Yeah. Now, we don't necessarily have evidence of which particular branch of Eastern mysticism they're coming from. And we don't know necessarily their scientific point of origin with any of this.
Yeah.
What we do know is there was a thing, some sort, and I've read up on this a little bit here and there, and I will quantify this by saying I am not an astronomer myself, although I have been known to dabble, in as much as any good Star Trek fan does from time to time. And in articles I've read about this, and I'm paraphrasing and speaking from experience, so I don't have these to hand, there have been some kind of historical archaeological evidence to suggest like a cometary fragment or something that was local to the region round about this time that would have presented itself as a particularly mobile and very bright star in the region. In as much as one can prove the past that way astronomically, I don't know the specific scientific details. Again, put a picture of Janet from The Good Place up here, not a scientist. But I have read multiple articles that have suggested there is an astronomical phenomenon that would have presented as some kind of star or bright light in the sky round about that period of time.
Okay.
And I think if it was a comet or other body of some sort, then it stands to reason that like astronomers or astrologers or astrologians of the period might have had something in the books from centuries or millennia previous, or however long it was, that said thing had circled the solar system. Because there are bodies that circle the solar system on the order of thousands of years.
Oh, yeah.
So there may have been something written down by forebearers upon forebearers of hundreds of thousands of years past that had been made a note of, and they kept an eye on, and like they found again, like, okay, this thing only ever comes back when X happens for whatever reason. I don't know. The specifics beyond that are beyond me. You need someone with multiple doctorates in archaeology and history and stuff like that.
It's
do not have.
Safe to say there's prophecy going on here, though, too.
Yeah, prophecy of some spot. And what I think is interesting here is that this is where the idea of prophecy kind of crosses the line between what it has been historically of simply just speaking the truth to power, and the more modern understanding of prophecy as predicting the future through magic. Which I do want to go ahead and say out there for all my many evangelical viewers and listeners, isn't a thing. Like in Christendom, we don't see prophecy as magical prediction of the future. That's not a thing we do. But we also do evidence that there is the ability to observe nature and divine an understanding of God through it, which is what the Magi are in effect doing here. Like they're observing nature, and they're operating presumably off of a historical observation of nature and making rational or rational adjacent understandings of what's happening in the world as a result. So that's the way I understand what's going on. I hope that makes some kind of sense.
I was under the impression that there was written Jewish prophecy about.
Oh no, that's a different
situation.
There's plenty of written Jewish
And that the
prophecy.
star is part of. Oh, but you're saying why would they still have some? Yeah.
Right.
Sorry.
Like there's plenty of Jewish prophecy on the idea of the coming Messiah. And it's worth noting. I just did a Bible study. No, sorry, I didn't do a Bible study. I did a sermon prep on a passage from Isaiah that deals with some of the messianic prophecy stuff. Most of it is Isaiah not saying at a specific point in time this thing is going to happen. It's Isaiah saying the result of your actions will cause God to do X thing, which isn't necessarily a prediction of a future so much it is a condemnation of the based in cause and effect, which connects to the fact that that's what prophecy is. It's someone saying to power, hey, keep doing what you're doing and God's going to do a thing and you're not going to like it, and it'll involve a baby and a star and other crap that's going to really mess you up for a couple thousand years. So the concept of it being predictive in that way is inconsistently applied. It doesn't necessarily seem to have been the intent of original messianic prophecy, but it has been applied as such going forward, even within the Jewish community at the time. So is it meant to be predictive? I don't tend to think so, but some people do.
See, this is bizarre as hell to me because I feel like I've gotten very much a different view of that from every pastor that I've had that
Well, let me tell you, as somebody who likes to slap on the dog collar, wear a robe and stole, and be all fanciful and whatnot, we like being a little mystical, us pastors. I mean, let's be honest. Embracing the mysticism of Christianity gives us authority. Because we can speak to the mystic. It gives us the sense of intermediating between an unknowable divine and a knowable reality. But I got to be honest, there's enough unknowable about the divine that I don't need to make knowable stuff unknowable. That's my perspective on it. And most of this stuff, we know what its intent was. We know what it was written down for. I don't need to pretend that it's mystical future prediction. We don't really get in on that. And there's enough mystical and weird and confusing and atemporal and, oh my God, makes quantum mechanics make sense and then also not at the same time about God. I don't need to add stuff to that. But that's just my take. People be what people be. So anything else you wanted to pull at that, or should we discard the fruit and keep going?
No, I think we can probably mosey along.
All right. So he called together the chief priests and the scribes of the people, inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. From verse 5 now. They told him, in Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet, and you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel. Then Herod secretly called for the Magi and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word so that I may also go and pay him homage. When they had heard the king, they set out, and there ahead of them went the star they had seen in the east, until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chest, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road.
Did you have anything you wanted to throw in about the rest of that? Part of it is a lot of this is really familiar to me. I grew up at church.
As did a lot of us. I'm going to sprinkle some fruit here for a minute. Let's say strawberry. I like strawberries. They're cool. And I want to go ahead and talk about what's happening here. Now, shout out to my wife, who is personally my favorite pastor. Because, she the best. She's got a lot of love for the spirit. She's one of the most godly people I know, and also definitely lets me kiss her from time to time, which is something that a lot of all pastors do. So personally, I think she's the best. So she preached on this not too long ago and noted an interesting thing with what's happening here. Now, she did her sermon on Epiphany, and she talked about how the Magi have a bit of an epiphany here too. Epiphany being defined here as the motion from what you've been raised to believe and expect to a realization that God's doing a different thing. So the Magi are institutionalists, right? Like they come from their own country, their own institution. It's a bit of a misnomer to call them kings or royalty, but they're definitely high status individuals where they're coming from, at least so we understand. And so when they get into Israel, and they've come to the understanding that this star has something to do with the Jewish Messiah, their first normal human reaction is, okay, well, clearly we have to go talk to the king about that. Power and authority will know what to do. It's the same as, every white American kid growing up saying, if you run into trouble, go talk to the cops. They're the good guys. And the result here is pretty much the same.
Assorted gestures on screen.
Yeah. No, and the result here, if we want to read it, is pretty much the same. A lot of dead people. I'll be honest, guys, if you watch this far and don't realize that I do not have a lot of mercy for like law enforcement and authority figures in the US, strap in. We're going to talk about it. So anyway, like they do exactly that. They trust in power. And power manipulates them. Power says, hey, go and do the thing. And power uses them. Like their expectation is, we're going to go to the king. The king will know what to do. He's the king of Israel. It's an, Jewish Messiah we're looking for. He will know. I mean, he'll know better than we. We're what are we, Magi from the East? Like, we're astrologians. We don't know crap about Jewish religion. So we'll
they're from out of town and they're from out of town apparently and don't realize, like, no.
It doesn't quite work that way. So they rock up to the king, and the king says, oh yeah, I have no clue where he is. Why don't you go find him for me? And immediately the Magi are kind of like, wait, what? And they have this moment of realization here that they're like, wait, power doesn't know. And so when they leave Herod's presence, they're exactly in the same place they were before they talked to him, following the star and not really anything else. And so their epiphany moment is the realization that power isn't going to help us. We have to trust in God, and they do, and they find him. And that is, I think, a really cool moment that we don't talk about enough. Like, we don't talk about the fact that the Magi's first move was basically to go to the cops, to say, well, we'll talk to the people in charge. They'll know what's up. Mm-hmm. And their expectations were dashed in that meeting. Like, Herod did not know what was up, and Herod was pretty forthright about it. And honestly, kind of cartoonishly obvious about what he was doing here.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, go and find him so I might pay homage. Yeah. That's going to play real well on the podcast, by the way.
There's a Halloween costume in there to go with those facial expressions. That's fantastic.
Oh yeah. I'm just imagining Herod as played by Vincent Price. So like that's a piece we don't talk about enough, and I think it's worth noting that right off the bat here, the realization that power is not in it for you is like at the head of this story.
Oh, I mean, just the entire, anyone even vaguely familiar with the story of Christ's birth seems like it's glaringly obvious immediately that like authority is repeatedly the enemy for these people.
Yeah, which makes me wonder why so many American quote unquote Christians are like, yay, the government, and oh, we've got to respect our troops and our soldiers and our police and our people in power and got to worship them totally all the time. Like, I'm pretty sure there's a solid anti-power theme to Jesus himself.
I feel like power free of scrutiny is a bad thing.
Mhm. Notwithstanding that that's the basic principle of democracy in general, Christian perspectives on it notwithstanding, but power is meant to be scrutinized and held in check. Hell, we were
God's sake, America was founded on the idea of, no, you can't tell me what to do. This isn't
Yeah.
fair.
I mean, you want to really roll it back, like we were talking about prophets and prophecy a minute ago. The role of a prophet in ancient Israel was specifically to hold kings in check by telling them, no, that's not what God wants. You're an idiot. Stop it. Like that was literally their job description. Like this wasn't just random, ancient prophets weren't just like random dudes who were moved by the Holy Spirit to preach. No, like they had a specific role in the temple government to tell the king off all the time, which admittedly is an awesome job and I wish we still had. So failing that, I go with preacher, and we do our best. So yeah, shall we continue then?
Yes, please.
All right, because now we're getting into the fun stuff. Now, after they had left, so we're in verse 13, by the way, after they had left, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and flee to Egypt and remain there until I tell you. For Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him." Then Joseph got up, took the child and his mother by night, and went to Egypt and remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what had been spoken by the Lord through the prophet, "Out of Egypt I have called my son."
Okay, so
I'm going to say mango.
Pineapple. Sorry, I'm trying to process my thoughts on this because again, this is something I've heard a bajillion times, and I'm trying to look at it freshly. How long until the death of Herod? What was that? Like conveniently 6 weeks later.
It is an indeterminate amount of time. Record keeping from the era is spotty, so we don't know exactly how long. But
ballpark.
It wasn't on the order of weeks or months. I'll tell you that. That's as much as I can reasonably say. It was definitely years, probably several of them. The next instance we have of Jesus being back in Nazareth is kind of like preteen Jesus, so it could be as much as a decade.
Dang.
So this is no small amount of time there in Egypt. We can say that much for sure.
So Jesus spent his entire young childhood, it would seem, or at least a sizable chunk of his young childhood in Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like something we don't talk about. I mean, there's not much here. It's interesting.
Especially if you're in a church that's very anti-immigrant, you definitely don't talk about the fact that Jesus spent close to a quarter of his life as an immigrant. A refugee, nonetheless, fleeing from government persecution and, shall we say, death squads. God, this sounds achingly familiar for some reason. Almost like it's a thing that still happens today that we should probably be looking to see the face in Jesus of. But anyway, I digress. I don't know what we're talking about.
You've got a fire under your ass today.
Old Testament is good to dig into, but I do love me some gospel. I'm a Christian pastor for a reason.
Yeah.
If you're looking for a cod to slap people about the head and shoulders with, this is a good one. So
yeah, cod slapper you always have been. All right, yeah, let's.
They flee to Egypt as refugees, and consider, by the way, what it's got to mean, not just for Jesus to have been a refugee, but have you ever been to an immigrant community anywhere in your general area of the country?
I live in an area that's pretty homogenous, but I've lived in really diverse areas. I've not hung out in specifically ethnic neighborhoods to my knowledge.
Yeah. That's fair.
And certainly not to my knowledge, but I don't know which of my neighbors is an immigrant or whatever. Here's part of the problem. I don't care. Okay.
Well, let me rephrase this. When you're dealing with immigrants and refugees particularly en masse. I'm talking about like the one or two who come and live in your community, and so
You're talking about like a settlement.
I'm talking about, yeah, like settlements of immigrant communities within an area. Like before moving to Japan, I lived in New Brunswick, New Jersey, and there is a sizable South American and Central American immigrant community in that area. And these communities, and hell, I live in an immigrant community now. Like,
Yeah.
because I'm part of the non-Japanese kind of foreigner immigrant community here, because racial dynamics are different in Japan. But anyway, so
That's
like
the way of putting it.
yeah, that's a very brief way of putting it, because I could say a lot
Very
more.
generous way of putting it. Go ahead.
Yeah, in any case, immigrant communities tend to be unique because, one, they tend to be a little less homogenized. Like when I talked about New Brunswick, I said kind of Latin, Central, and South American immigrant communities, because I wasn't going to say Mexican communities. A lot more than that. I was going to say like Chilean communities. A lot more than that. There's people from like larger regional bodies than just single nations.
Yeah.
So you are dealing with people that would otherwise be culturally diverse in their home areas that are seen as kind of a unified body in their new community. So you tend to get a mixing of sub-communities that you wouldn't necessarily get in your home country. Add on to that each one of these are kind of unified by the fact that they're outsiders in a foreign land. So you wind up with a broader sense of neighborliness and community within that space than you would tend to get outside that space. So for example, I have a much easier time. I mean, like I'm reasonably fluent in Japanese, but I have a much easier time associating with people who speak English, not just because it's my foreign language, but because we share a cultural bound and stuff like that. Like when I have a difficulty, it's the English speakers who are turning up. The Japanese speakers, even the ones who are my friends, are usually second or third to the party. So there is that kind of community identity, and it's founded on the sense that we're all in this together. And so that is a kind of like a fundamental aspect of immigrant communities is, look, no matter what else we might disagree on, like back home, we might have been enemies, but here we're in this together. And that is kind of a prevalent sense in immigrant communities. Roll that forward a decade or two to Rabbi Jesus of the Hillel school of kind of Pharisaic rabbinical thought, and you have basically the gospel of the immigrant. Like what Jesus is preaching is God as seen through the lens of the immigrant community, and there is like, it's worth identifying that like the gospel of Jesus Christ as preached in this time and place was filtered through the lens of the immigrant community. You know, focusing on treating your neighbor as yourself, overcoming barriers and conflicts that separate us, and so that we can be united against outside forces. Like that is what an immigrant community is and does. So that there's an amplification, I think, that happens here that I think is important. Anyway, that's my rant on that. Anything else you want to talk about here in the escape to Egypt?
No, I'm just thinking that if a God wanted to interject themselves into the world in such a way as to really register the human experience, that sounds like a hell of a way to do it.
Right? Like, you know, God wants to be incarnate, and God chooses to go into what is simultaneously the most difficult and arguably one of the best ways to experience human community. A little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. So let's go ahead and move on to some dead babies, shall we?
Jesus, dude.
I'm the best at transitions, aren't I? All right, so we're picking up with verse 16, the massacre of the infants, in case you thought I was being flippant for no reason. Like, no, that's definitely what's happening next. The massacre of the infants from verse 16. When Herod saw that he had been tricked by the Magi, he was infuriated, and he sent and killed all the children in and around Bethlehem who were 2 years old or under, according to the time he had learned from the Magi. Then what had been spoken through the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled. A voice was heard in Ramah, wailing in loud lamentation, Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be consoled because they are no more. Any fruit for the kiddos?
Is this, avocado. Is this in every version?
Yes
Is the
and no.
master always there?
Well, let's go ahead and bring it up here because I have it to hand. So the Epiphany story in Matthew, we got. Mark doesn't have an infancy narrative, so it doesn't matter. It'll be just Luke. Let's start with chapter 3. No, that's John the Baptist. Birth of Jesus, shepherds and the angels. Jesus, no, we don't get it in Luke. And let's check out our boy John. John, I'm pretty sure just leaps right into John the Baptist as well. So yeah, it's pretty much, yeah, it's just Matthew. Because Matthew and Luke are our two infancy narratives, and Matthew is the only one that's concerned with the larger infancy narrative. Luke just kind of rolls forward. So Matthew is the one that focuses on the Epiphany story and the stuff that follows after. I will say, as we start, because as we continue doing this, we're going to start talking about comparative gospels and stuff like that. It's worth knowing Matthew's goal, like each gospel has a different goal. And Matthew's goal is to put Jesus in the context of Jewish prophecy and tradition. It's often said that Matthew is the Jewish gospel because it's specifically for those who are operating with a Jewish religious context. So the things that Matthew chooses to focus on aren't going to be the same as all the others. Oddly enough, if you want the more unvarnished perspective, I always say go to the Gospel of Mark, because Mark is the oldest of them. It's the bluntest of them and the shortest of them too. And it's really less concerned with tradition, with prophecy, with divinity very much. And it really just focuses on Jesus, the man. And it's the oldest account that we have. So anyway, I digress. Anything else about the massacre of the infants? Like, I think it's worth
it seems
noting.
like kind of a major undertaking and the sort of thing that would get you overthrown as well. Like, how many people's babies can you just kill and like not have
less so in
lose
the
their minds
world.
on you?
Like less so in the ancient world. That was the sort of shit you could get away with.
Seriously, this was a thing.
Yeah, like
yeah, no, sorry. My Western Civ 1 book is trying to tear itself off the shelf and beat me in the face repeatedly. Like, yes, this kind of shit happened.
Yeah, and a lot.
People.
Like, and like it's worth knowing that there's no, like, he does this, and like at this point they're under Roman rule too. So like it's common enough place that even the Roman governor's like, yeah, all right, whatever. So, I mean, I'm not going to say it's a good thing. I definitely won't do that, but it was, if not normal, then reasonable enough. Like all Herod really had to do is say, yeah, we were likely to see a threat or an upset from there as a result of some prophecy. So I just killed all the kids to make sure it wouldn't happen. Hell, the Romans would have treated it as efficient governance, which is kind of the way Herod saw it. Like, let us not understate the brutality of regimes during those periods, or to be honest, regimes during this period, because like we put a fancy sheen on our brutality, but we still see kids dying a lot in the modern age. We just make it look less intentional. Everybody thinks they live in a more elegant age. Yeah, but you know, we're not a more civilized age because we don't have lightsabers. Come on, deep cut Star Wars joke. Give me credit on that one. I didn't go to Star Trek. I teed you up for that one. Yeah, anyway. Yeah. Right. Anything else here, or should we move on? No, I think we can go ahead and mosey on to the return from Egypt. All right. So, return from Egypt, starting from verse 19. When Herod died, an angel of the Lord suddenly appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, for those who were seeking the child's life are dead." Then Joseph got up, took the child and his mother, and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was ruling Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. And after being warned in a dream, he went away to the district of Galilee. There he made his home in a town called Nazareth, so that what had been spoken through the prophets might be fulfilled. He will be called a Nazarene. All right, so I don't think we need to throw any more fruit at it because we're at the end here, but like there's some stuff happening.
I'm just realizing for as much of a map geek as I can be, I think I must have been looking at my maps wrong as a kid in my Bible, because somehow I didn't realize that like Nazareth was in Galilee. I thought of them as separate cities, but it sounds like Galilee is like more of a city-state sort of situation, and then
Galilee is the
Nazareth is just
region.
okay.
Galilee is the region. Nazareth is one of the cities in Galilee.
Okay.
And by the way, I think we did, I don't know if we mentioned this in our last New Testament video, but like this is not a small distance they're traveling here. Like Israel is roughly the size of New Jersey, give or take. So it's not like a small place. So this is they're going for a minute to get from place to place here. So yeah, so time to head back. So he sees that Archelaus is ruling Judea in place of his father Herod, Archelaus, the son of Herod. And so he decides not to go back there.
He might still be mad.
Yeah, he might still be mad about the whole Messiah thing. Let's go do some carpentry up in Galilee. So that's the process that happens here. And it's also worth noting, and I do like bringing this up too, that this is the major contribution, like this and what we talked about on the our last video on the New Testament as well. These are the major contributions of Joseph to the narrative. Like, we get a lot more Mary everywhere else, and Mary is the big figure, you know, as it should be. She's the one who actually gave birth to the thing. But you know,
Local pastor refers to baby Jesus as the thing.
You know, he's a superhero of some sort. I mean, you know, I'm sick of making the Superman reference. You know, let's get crazy here. But no, so Mary's the one who actually gives birth. So, you know, she should get a lot of the credit here. But, you know, Papa Joe's in this too. And Joseph is the one who's kind of in charge of all the logistical arrangements of fleeing from Herod, returning to Israel, discerning that Nazareth is where they should go, and setting up shop there. He's present a little bit in the story from here, like he's still there when we have kind of Jesus as a kid in the temple, but that's the last we see of Joseph for the most part. So it's not a small thing, but it is the only thing. Any questions about any of this stuff?
No, well, I mean, we've kind of gone on for quite a bit here, I think.
I think we're getting down to the end anyway, and
yeah,
we got some construction going on outside or something. A lot of trucks going past.
it's really interesting. I know I keep saying this, but it's really interesting to be looking at this from sort of another angle. It's bouncing back on your prophecy statement though, about prophecy being about speaking truth to power. Well, I agree that as well, but it says in verse 23, there he made his home in a town called Nazareth, so that what had been spoken through the prophets might be fulfilled. He will be called a Nazarene. That's very, very specific and intentionally being spoken and held as prophecy. That is the prediction of the future, correct?
That is the way it's being treated. However, I'm going to have to look up exactly where this one comes from, because I'm not sure. And I want to look at it because, like, if we look at the prophecy reference in like verse 18, this was what had been spoken. Then what had been spoken through the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled. The voice was heard in Ramah, wailing and loud lamentation, Rachel and weeping for her children. She refused to be consoled because they are no more. Like, that's poetic speaking against current powers. And then the powers read that and like, oh yeah, that's not about us though. You're talking about the future. So a lot of the development of the idea of prophecy as future prediction kind of comes from that sort of mentality. And I'm not saying that's
I get that for stuff like Revelation and whatnot. I'm talking about messianic prophecy specifically.
And I'm not saying it's a recent thing. Christians didn't invent this. Like, this has been going on since the idea of prophecy was a thing. The idea of it being a future prediction, when the people who are prophesying are like, no, I'm just telling you to knock it the hell out. So that's a thing. I am going to take the unusual step of actually looking up where precisely this comes from, because my Bible doesn't actually give me specific notes.
Well, and I'm going to occasionally have a philosophical bone to chew with you about things like this. Like, no, wait. You know.
Okay. So I'm seeing some. Okay. All right. So a quick read up on some commentary material I have to hand suggests that one, the he shall be a Nazarene thing, as I had expected, is not referencing any prophecy found in the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible. So let's go ahead and put that one out there right now. Now, this happens in the New Testament where one of the writers refers to something as this shall be to fulfill some prophecy, and there's no mention of it everywhere. There's one that comes up like in the back half of the New Testament. I want to say it's like one of the James or Jude or something like that, where they talk about like a fight between the devil over, like a fight with the devil over Moses's body or something like that, which is a story that's not found anywhere in the Bible. So like this sort of referencing something that we don't have is pretty common. Best guesses on this have to do with I think it's Isaiah 11. Isaiah 11:1, which is the whole there shall come a shoot from the stump of Jesse, and a branch from its roots shall bear fruit. The Hebrew term in there, NZR Nestor for one of the words in there. It could also, since Hebrew doesn't have vowels, be construed to be the same root as Nazareth.
That's right. You've gone over this a couple of different times before, where the sheer differences in the writing system make things harder to understand.
Yeah, and this is an issue. Like we get this when we're talking about like what is the name of God. We have YHVH because ancient Hebrew didn't have consonants. We apply consonants to that, and we get Yahweh. But if you apply Latin or Greek consonants, you get Yehovah, which becomes Jehovah. Like they're all the different attempts to apply vowels to something we don't know the vowels for. The ancient Hebrew that they're talking about here from the whole root stump of Jesse thing has the word that word, the Nestor, in there, which the vowels are kind of an assumption that we've added on, and if you don't take those as gospel fact, you have the root NZR, which is the thing that's actually written down, and that could be Nazareth as well. So like that's the kind of parallelism we're seeing here. There is not anything that I would go so far as to say is accurate in any reasonable way.
So basically they just said it.
Yeah, they pretty much just said it, and that's really what it is.
Oh, I'm already disappointed in the New Testament. Why are you doing this to me, man?
I know you were hoping for it to be so much better than the Old Testament when it comes to writing this shit down, but I got to tell you, it is not. There are improvements. Like there are more historical connections. Like if we look over at the book of Luke, for example, Luke will be a great one when we get to it, because Luke is often called the physician because he was the most meticulous and academic in the way he kept stuff down, according to the style of the times, not like by modern standards. So there's a lot more historical referencing and stuff that happens there. Like it is better about that stuff than the Old Testament, but that doesn't mean it rises to the level of what we would call good. So we still have to do a lot of contextual understanding about what these guys were getting at and about. And that is why we're doing the New Testament videos too, is so we can do exactly that. Yay, deconstruction. Those of you listening on the podcast cannot see the terrible face she's giving me right now for that. I am sorry to be the voice of disappoint.
Friend, I am disappointed.
I am the sad.
Yeah.
But for all that we rip into it, like it's not that there isn't good stuff here. It's not that.
Oh, no, of course not. Like
there are important things going on here. Like Jesus is an immigrant. Like that is unheard of. This is amazing. This is great. It's grand. It's wonderful. It's what should be. And we don't want to lose that simply because we're deconstructing the way it's presented. So anyway, that's the note I think we should end on, unless you got anything else you want to safe word our way through.
No, I think we're probably good.
All right. So with that being said, then allow me to kindly direct any of you who are still listening over to our Discord server, where we are having everything that is happening, all of our conversations, all of our life, everything is over there. Come join us. Links down below. We're doing a Bible study every week. We're actually talking about opening up another Bible study because there's people interested in learning more stuff. So for the love of actual God, join in. Put your voice in, get in on some of these conversations. And if nothing else, if you could pretty please, with sugar on top, Jesus, Herbert Walker Christ, please.
Like, share, and subscribe. Jesus, Herbert Walker Christ, really?
Well, I mean, what would you call Republican Jesus?
Supply side Jesus generally, but
Oh, if y'all don't know by now, I really just do like messing with her every time I kick it to her just to see what happens.
I'm tired, man.
It's my hobby. All right, for the rest of y'all, have a great week. We will see you in the next episode, where we are going to be getting back to Genesis with, I believe we are on Genesis chapter 25. Yeah, we're still on 25, and we're going to be talking about Jacob and Esau. So tune in for that one. It's going to be a hoot.
Right on.
Bye,
Later.
y'all.